kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me. To get the headstock bearings, you're first going to have to remove the wheel. Start by removing the brake calipers. You might have to remove some other cables, such as speedometer cable, if your bike has it. The V-Strom has got a few bolts on the left side that you're going to have to remove. Unbolt the pinch bolt that holds the axle. Using a 6mm socket or tool, undo the front axle and it should come out. Now to remove the axle and the tire and the wheel, lift up on the tire, pull out the axle, and now we're going to have to remove the brake lines. You're going to have to hang up the brake lines with the calipers onto a place that's not in the way. Remove the forks. You're going to have to unbolt this top bolt, which is a 10mm, using a wrench. You don't even have to remove the plastic. That's the beauty of the V-Strom. It has enough space for you to get in there. After you get it loose, just remove it using your finger. Now the same thing with the right fork. At the bottom you have two bolts in the lower triple tree. Use a 10mm wrench to get to it, and then when you get it loose, just use your fingers and your hands to pull it out. I like that you can work on the V-Strom very easily because it has plenty of room. After you undo the left and the right, you should be able to slide the whole front assembly out. And if you put a jack underneath the bike, you can maneuver it much easier. Now undo the top bolt that's holding the top triple tree and pull it out. The next thing to do is to undo this top nut by using a screwdriver. All you want to do is move the top one, not the bottom one. Hit it a few times and it should come loose. You're going to have to remove this 10mm bolt in the lower triple tree that I forgot. It holds the brake lines. And now remove the washer. The washer has a safety pin. Keep note of it. Now let's remove the bottom nut. This one will tighten your steering, so if you ever want to adjust your steering, that's how to do it. Hand at the bottom here, so when you're unscrewing this top nut, you're basically just holding it to make sure this doesn't drop. We can position this a little bit, and now we're going to remove this. So this is, it came out like this. It's a piece of rubber and it's got like some metal on here, and then it's got this metal. And make sure you know how it came out, not this. This is the top part, so I'm going to line it up and put it aside. Let's go and see what's in here. I see the bearing. Here's the bearing. Came out like this. So this is the top bearing. I'm very surprised that they have very little grease on here. There is some grease on here, but not much. This one's going to be very difficult to remove because there's a very thin edge, and what we have to do is remove this metal bit. There's one at the bottom, one at the top. I'm going to start doing the bottom one, so I'm going to put my screwdriver on here, and there's a little bit of a lip on there, and what I'm going to do is just gently tap it a little bit on one side and then move to the other side, and there's like a little bit of a lip, and you just keep doing that. What I'm using is a very long screwdriver to get to that little metal bit and a hammer. So what happens is that when you have like one of those spots where your handlebar wants to keep tracking straight, there's usually a groove here, and as I'm looking at it, I'm kind of twisting it. Hopefully you're seeing it. There are quite a few grooves in there. I see damage to the metal, so clearly this has never been changed. It's a little bit harder from the bottom, but make sure that you hit the metal on opposite sides to get the race out. Otherwise, you're going to be pushing on just one side. Even though it looks like I'm just pushing on one side, it's really just the editing of the video. I'm going from side to side. And here we go. It was kind of a difficult process because it takes so long to hammer it out, and you don't want to be too rough with it. This is the kit that I bought, all ball bearings for the V-Strom. I think a lot of these are the same, but that's the part number if you need it. Comes with a nice little sticker. You're going to get 2 of these. I believe these are the seals. So these are what we're going to be replacing. Make sure you don't contaminate this thing. The last thing you want is to get dirt inside here. I'm actually going to grease it up. This is something that's different. So apparently these are the tapered type of roller bearings compared to the old one. The old style, right? This is antiquated by far. I'm not sure why Suzuki even does this with their bikes. Even like the new V-Stroms have this sort of system. I guess it's easier to make. Also, it's just made out of very cheap plastic. The tapered bearings that you get from all balls are much higher quality. Just from touching them, like I feel like the quality in them. But they roll freely in these ball bearings. And what happens is that over time, the ball bearings start to wear down on the metal. And that's why there's these, you feel it on your handlebars. For example, most of the time, your bike is going to be tracking straight, and you'll feel it when you move your handlebars left and right. You feel it maybe stay in the middle as if you got like a steering damper sort of thing. It makes handling a lot worse in cornering, and you want your bike to have a lot of dexterity. So any binding that you would have on the steering, this would probably be the cause. The bottom bearing on my bike was pretty worn, and the top one was fine, but I'm going to replace both of them. I do like the way these machine parts look, and it's a little bit better. This is apparently this is going to last you a whole lot more time than the regular ball bearing. So get these if you can help it. And I believe it's $30, so it's worth it. This is the other thing that comes with a kit. It's a seal. It's like a rubber and then like a little bit of metal. We're gonna use some of this tape because I don't want to scratch that rod. So what I'm going to do is wrap this painter's tape all over the rod because I don't want to scratch it. We have to remove the bearing at the bottom, and it's a very tight fit, so you have to hammer it up, and I don't really trust myself with doing it without some protection on that metal. The last thing I want is to damage the triple tree and then have to get another triple tree. So I'm just going to put as much tape as I can, and I just want it there just for a little bit while I cut that bearing out. We're going to do a different method for removing it. Some people hammer it up. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think it's easier just to cut it because the bottom bearing, it's already messed up and I already got the bearing, so it doesn't really matter. We're going to use a Dremel to cut the old bearing out. And you have to have a pretty good steady hand to do this. You do not want to cut into the metal of the rod. That's why you have to put the tape and the cloth and everything there. But this metal is extremely hard, so even if you slid a little bit and you scratch the metal, it wouldn't be too bad because that metal is pretty strong. It'll take you some time to cut it. Be patient and eventually it will. Once you get to the very bottom, don't use the Dremel anymore. Once you make a few cuts here, once this starts to move freely, that means that this is getting loose. So now let's pull it out. going to do with the Dremel is make a cut here, and this way I can put the new bearing on there just by pounding this one. This is the old dust seal, and I butchered it removing. It doesn't matter because we're going to be installing a new one anyway. Some of the grease that I bought for my seals and everything, and this is just regular waterproof grease. I'm going to put it all over the triple. I don't have any dirt around it. We need to make sure that we grease the hell out of this, but the bearing has got quite a bit of grooves here. Make sure you take plenty of grease and just kind of ram it in there. The importance of not power washing a bike, and I've been guilty of power washing bikes before, but now that I have to do this job here, I realize maybe I'll never power wash anything ever again. There we go. Once it gets to here, it is going to be tight. You're not going to be able to squeeze it. This is why we cut this, because now we'll be able to fit it the wrong way up, like this. And now we should be able to pound this in without damaging, and we're not going to be tapping it hard. By working your way around slowly and just hitting it a few times here and there, that's all you need to drive the bearing in. You don't need to use gorilla strength for it, but just keep in mind that it's a time sensitive sort of thing. You have to go slow. It helps to have somebody else holding the triple tree, and I don't have a vise, so I had my father help me out with this. So when you have, you know it's tight when the rubber does seal at the bottom, you can't move it anymore. So right now I can still move it, so I'm going to hit it just a few more times to make sure that it's nice and firm in there. Once I can't move that rubber anymore, I know that's the correct spot. To remove the old one, just turn it upside down, hit it a few times, and it should drop right out. We got the bearing on there. Very excited. Now, look at the difference of the bearings here. Quite a difference. These are very old school bearings. You know, there's really nothing wrong with these things, except these should last you a lot more time than the old bearings. Here is the top hole, and I have my metal bit all lubed up, ready to go. And it has to receive the bearing, so it's going to be facing up. The thin part is facing up because the way it's going to receive the bearing. This was a pretty time-consuming bit, and it took me quite a bit of time to understand how it went in. You have to get it started exactly right. Once it's exactly right, by hitting it softly, you can use a bigger, heavier tool, and what I used was a very large socket to drive it down. And here I am driving the new one down slowly. Now I took a big wrench like this, hit it a few times, and now it's in there. Yeah. Use the old race to drive it down even further. It has to go more than the surface, just a few more millimeters. Now make sure that it seats properly and get started on the bottom one. The bottom one is a little bit harder just from the position of hitting it, but it's the same process that you use for the top one. Once you drive that race all the way and it's flush with the metal of the triple tree, you need to use the old race, line it up, because you need to drive it a few more millimeters upwards. And make sure that you grease the insides and everything. Put plenty of grease. So now put that socket in there, give it a few whacks, and you should be done. Make sure you grease the bearings throughout. They have to have plenty of grease. Do not skip on the grease. Now fit the dust seal. The next thing is the big rubber boot. Now install the first nut. The first nut is the one that's going to adjust the tightness of the steering. So if you want it to be a little tighter, push it a little bit. There is a nice sweet spot in there. You just use hand tightness and you can twist it a little bit. If it's too tight, loosen that nut. The next thing you're going to do is the washer. There is a safety tab right there, and you need to line it up with the rod. There's only one way of installing it. Once it's in there, that's a safety washer, and then you put the top washer or the top nut on top of that, and that really firms up everything. Take a screwdriver and hit it, just the top one, and rotate it. That's going to tighten up the whole assembly. Now everything is straightforward. We're just rebuilding the bike. The triple tree on the top goes in, and then you have a washer, and then you have the nut. Make sure you tighten that nut before you put on the handlebars, because you need to tighten it and the handlebars are in the way. The next step is just the building of the bike, putting in the forks, putting in the front hugger, the wheel, and everything. It's the same process that you're going to be doing for fork seals and everything, and it's pretty important to know how to rebuild the bike. Usually when I'm doing this, I forget something, and usually the brake lines are off or I have to move them. Make sure when you twist the wheel there's nothing binding. It could be that you have like a line or a cable that's not the right way. This is the time to figure it out, and then if you need to do something, just remove it and fix it properly. You should be able to turn the wheel freely and not have any kinks in the steering. This has been a great upgrade. The taper bearings are much better than the regular bearings that I removed. And it's very important to have good steering bearings when you're riding. That's how you do the headstock bearings on a 2006 V-Strom 650. The process is the same for a lot of bikes. It might be a little bit different from bike to another, so you're going to have to check your manual on it, but this is the way it should be feeling. Right now I have it on the center stand, so it's kind of wobbling a bit, but when you move the handlebars now, it's nice and smooth. There are no kinks in the steering. This is perfect. The headstock bearings on this bike lasted me 63,000 miles, so I'm ready to go for another 60,000 miles. And if I can do it, anybody else can do it. So this beats taking your bike to the shop and spending hundreds of dollars trying to fix it. And you don't have to do this very much. It's just once in a while. Hopefully this was useful to some of you, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.